Well, welcome. My name is Tracy Hart, and I am the CEO of the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation. One of the primary activities of the OI Foundation is to provide timely, accurate, and medically verified information to medical professionals and constituents alike. We will be using the series of podcasts to provide information on a variety of topics related to the diagnosis and treatment of OI. Each podcast will feature an OI medical expert. Our podcast today features Dr. Brendan Lee, Professor and Chairman of the Department of Molecular and Human Genetics at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Lee is a member of the OI Foundation's Medical Advisory Council and the principal investigator of the newly formed Brittle Bone Disorder Consortium, part of the National Institutes of Health's Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. So welcome, Dr. Lee, and we're going to start with our first question. In your opinion, scientific research in the area of rare disease has really exploded. And why do you see that, and especially in the area of rare bone disease and osteogenesis imperfecta?
Well, good morning, Tracy. It's a pleasure to join you and to join you to talk about such an important topic. There's a lot of excitement right now in the study of rare diseases. I think the public, the government, the National Institutes of Health has seen this to be such a neglected area in health care and health research, and also an enormously important opportunity to learn about, in fact, not just rare diseases, but common diseases. And I think the study of brittle bone diseases, or osteogenesis imperfecta, has been really a poster child for this effort. As you know, we've made enormous strides as a field in the research of osteogenesis imperfecta, and our goal has been, of course, to help all of the families out there with OI. But at the same time, I think we in the public and the government and also industry recognize that in helping patients with OI, we're also helping to understand other forms of more common bone diseases. If you think about where we've been and what we've achieved to date, I think categorically we would agree that we've made a lot of progress. I think there have been several fronts where we've seen this progress. The first is certainly in the genetics. At the root of understanding and trying to treat any disease, you have to understand the cause. And that's, of course, in the case of osteogenesis imperfecta, starts with genetics, understanding the genetic basis of these conditions. For many decades, as you know, we understood OI to be caused by problems with type 1 collagen, the most common form of genetic cause of OI. But now, over the past 10 years, we and others have opened a floodgate, partly enabled by the advances in genetic technologies, to now understand that OI is not one disease, but many, many disorders. 13, 14, 15 different genetic causes of OI, and even more every day are being discovered. And this perhaps is not surprising, because making and maintaining bone is an extremely complex process. And so when mutations occur, not at anyone's fault, just naturally mutations occur that affect these important genes that control these processes, we can have weak bones. And so this has been, I think, probably the biggest advance in terms of understanding the different genetics. I think the second has been in the area of therapy. And again, when thinking about therapy, it often drives from an understanding of genetics. Obviously, one of the biggest advances has been bisphosphonate therapy, using medications which block the resorption or the breakdown of bone has been transformative, and this has improved the lives of many patients. Having said this, there is still even more to do, because bisphosphonate therapies may not be the optimal therapy for every type. And so now, I think, on the horizon is, in fact, research looking at not just medications that block the breakdown of bone, but also medications that stimulate the production of bone. And this will go hand in hand with some of the understanding of genetics. And then I think finally, another area where we're beginning to make an inroad, I think there's great need in this domain, is really developing evidence-based treatments. I think we're now doing a much better job of diagnosing these conditions with our understanding of genetics, but now the future needs to be focused on developing evidence to really apply the right therapies.
Excellent. And you mentioned future, and talking about the future and understanding that scientific research is critical to finding new treatments and ultimately a cure for any disease. We are now part of the Brittle Bone Disorders Consortium. I'd love for you to talk about that and why you feel this is a successful model for moving research forward in the area of OI research.
Well, this is a favorite topic of mine because I, as well as many of my colleagues, are quite impassioned about the Brittle Bone Disorders Consortium, or for short, we'll just call it the BBDC. I think that the reason why we're so excited about the BBDC is because, in fact, this is the strategy that we and other rare disease researchers have found to be most effective in moving the field forward in addressing some of the challenges that I just talked about previously. You know, when we think about rare diseases, they are, of course, by definition rare. And what we often end up with in the growth of a rare disease field is often many times experts who do research in rare disease, like myself and other in our community, and we gain a certain amount of expertise and knowledge in taking care of patients, in our laboratory work. But at the end of the day, it's still, I would say, limited by our unique view of that rare disease or of the world. And just like there are many different cultures in our world, every culture can look at a problem and see it from a different view. And in fact, that often happens in rare disease, where clinicians and scientists will look at the problem and see different things. And this is fine, because only in this diversity do we make discoveries. However, at the end of the day, to really take it to the next level, to drive to an evidence-based approach to therapy and treatment, we need to move to a cooperative model. And in fact, that's exactly what the BBDC represents. It's a cooperative model where investigators, scientists, clinicians, as well as individuals who lead technologies and different technology sites, as well as families, such as you know, the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation and the Children's Brittle Bone Foundation, with industry partners come together to work towards a common goal. And that common goal is, first, to understand the natural history of the disease, and second, to develop new therapies. And in fact, that's at the core of not just the BBDC, but also the larger Rare Disease Clinical Research Network, which is, of course, supported by the NIH. The other very important part of this, of course, is that it brings to bear a very important aspect, which is the peer-reviewed science and quality that NIH holds us all to. And it's only by critical assessment of each other's work that we can really improve the quality of our work. And I think that that other level of review is very important. And finally, of course, it's the element of bringing everyone together so that we marshal all of our resources so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So that gets me at what are its parts. So there are many partners, and as I mentioned, there are clinical sites which are tasked to do the research. We at Baylor College of Medicine here lead this network, but we have superb colleagues and investigators around the country, including Eric Orwell at the Oregon Health Sciences University, Deb Krakow at UCLA, Emily Germain-Lee at Kennedy Krieger Institute, Laura Tosi at the Children's National Medical Center, Kathy Raggio at the Hospital for Special Surgery, Peter Smith and Jerry Harris at the Chicago Shriners Hospital in Marquette, Jeff Krischer at the University of South Florida, David Ayer at the University of Washington, Eric Rush at Omaha with Paul Esposito, and of course Frank Rausch, Jean-Marc Loutuvet, and Francis Glorier, who've been leaders in this area at the Montreal Shriners. And then of course you at the OIF and also at the Children's Brittle Bone Foundation with David Coleman's. So really these are the players, and then add to the mix the partnership with industry. because at the end of the day, to really move treatments to patients, we need industry cooperation. And in the case of this initial study, Genzyme has been our partner in helping to move specific therapies to trial, but we hope in the future to work with, in fact, other companies, because there is an enormous need in the development of therapies. So one could ask, what are the goals of the BBDC? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the first is really understanding the natural history of the disease in an organized way. And this, of course, is founded on the great investment that the OIF and the OI Foundation made with the Link Clinical Research Center, which really allowed us, I would say, to build on it to obtain this funding. And this natural history study will be trying to understand the different manifestations of the different subtypes, how to treat, and what's the natural history of spine fractures in mild forms of OI, what's the natural history and best way to treat scoliosis in severe forms of OI, how pregnancy affects individuals, adults with OI, and then finally an important area of understanding how the craniofacial development and dental teeth problems occur in OI. So all of this will be studied in organized fashion, and I'm delighted to say that we've now activated many of our sites and have started recruiting in this 5-year study. This is, of course, in partnership with the National Institutes of Health, as I mentioned, in the form of the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Diseases, the National Institute of Dental Craniofacial Research, and the National Institute of Child Health, as well as the National Center for Translational Sciences, or Advancing Translational Sciences, as well as the Office of Rare Diseases. So there are many partners in NIH which are helping us do this. That's going to be the key program, which is the natural history study. But then the second important study that we hope to launch within this year is our phase 1 clinical trial of a new therapy called fresalumab, which is a therapy aimed at blocking signaling in the bones of patients with severe OI. And this is very exciting because this may be one of the first examples of a targeted therapy. So unlike some of the therapies that we've developed until now as a field, this therapy perhaps promises to treat an underlying mechanism of the disease, an altered communication or signaling that occurs in OI bone, and we hope would be more effective because of this targeted type of therapy. But that's what the trial will answer, whether that's true. There are pilot studies related to trying to begin to ask questions about how can we better characterize quality of life in adults with OI. Can we develop biomarkers to understand severity and help easily diagnose OI? And then, of course, training and outreach, which is in fact led by the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation, focused on training our next generation, as well as providing toolboxes for healthcare providers who may not be experts in the treatment of osteogenesis imperfecta.
Wonderful. Yes, we're so excited to be a part of the BBDC and are very excited about the future of all of the studies that are happening. And can you talk a little bit about that? And this is a consortium that we would like others to be a part of as well from the research perspective. Is that right?
Absolutely. So this consortium is a foundation on which we want to engage existing researchers who may not be currently partnered with the foundation or the consortium, as well as young investigators coming into the field of rare disease. And one of the things which is very important about the consortium is that it is governed by strict rules and processes where the data are freely available after they've been collected and analyzed. For example, all the data eventually will be deposited in public warehouses, information warehouses, so that scientists can get access to it. But even before that happens, we're always looking to partner with our families and with our fellow scientists. And so there are mechanisms where scientists can apply to use the biorepository that's being developed, to use some of the data that are being collected. And this is all standardized part of how National Institutes of Health helps to get information to scientists beyond even the ones doing the specific research that they're funding. Another great example of this is, in fact, partnering with families throughout the world, not just here in the U.S., with the contact registry. So that's another resource so that projects can be performed virtually by this contact registry, which is something led by Dr. Jeff Krischer. And again, there are mechanisms where investigators outside of the BBDC can apply to leverage some of this infrastructure, because at the core of the BBDC is, in fact, infrastructure. And we hope that this infrastructure will be used by many scientists and clinicians and families in the future, all focused, of course, on, I think, what are the emerging exciting areas coming on the horizon. I mean, I think there will be more genes and more genetics that cause increasingly rare bone conditions. And it's important to identify this, because while one may argue that very few patients may be affected by these increasingly rare genetic mutations, they have an enormous ability to transform our understanding of bone and treatment. So they're actually very important to continue to go after. I think new investigators coming to the field should begin to focus on targeted therapies. So it's not one size fits all. It may be eventually the deliverable of personalized medicine may in fact show itself in rare disease like OI first, where the type of genetic mutation you have may dictate the kind of therapies. And as I said, there are many different therapies coming down the pipelines and are being developed. I think new investigators should think about that. And then, of course, another area is, in fact, as we are better in taking care of children with OI, we now have increasingly many adults living with the disease. So another important challenge, I think, for investigators coming into the field would be to understand the problems that, beyond necessarily the bone, that affect the quality of life of especially adults. And we talked about teeth, but also soft tissues like tendons and ligaments and maybe muscle. So those are all new areas where I think researchers both in and outside the BBDC should focus on to better understand the natural history and perhaps then develop targeted therapies.
Excellent. All of this information, too, for folks listening, is available on our website at www.oif.org, and we'll have this information along with slides available as well. But in the last couple of minutes that we have, Dr. Lee, you mentioned the contact registry. And for us here at the OI Foundation, getting our community involved and our constituents excited about the possibility of this research is extremely important to us. And could you just give us sort of your thoughts, your closing thoughts on that partnership with the constituents of any disease disorder and scientific research? I mean, we know it's incredibly important here, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts as well.
Absolutely. I think that, science is extremely powerful, and scientific discovery is extremely powerful. But at the end of the day, for us to actually change medicine, change healthcare, improve the lives of our patients, it has to be in complete partnership with our families. And I think the OI Foundation has been such a great partner in terms of what we've achieved. Having said that, we all have a certain limited bandwidth, number of hours in the day, certain reach. How can we actually amplify what we're doing to communities which are not necessarily in a large osteogenesis imperfecta center or a center where there's a consortium site, where perhaps it may be even outside of the country. And I think there are many strategies to do this. I think the OI Foundation has done a great job with its regional meetings and this podcast, for example. Another I think a potentially transformative approach from a research and information perspective is the contact registry. This is a web-based tool that every patient with access, to the internet, and I think increasingly in all the world, there's greater and greater access to the internet. Families can, in fact, enroll in this contact registry to first give some basic information to help inform us about their disease, but also to get information back in terms of future studies that they may participate in. And in fact, it is itself a vehicle to do studies where scientists and families can help develop surveys and tools to actually test and answer questions. So it really, I think, is a multifaceted vehicle based on the Internet that allows us to reach throughout the whole world, and I would encourage all OI families to go to the OIF website or the RDCRC or the BBDC site to enroll in the contact registry.
Well, wonderful. Well, we can't thank you enough for sharing this information today with everyone. And again, if you're looking for more information on what we've talked about this morning, you can go to our website, www.oif.org, and that information will be up there along with slides from this podcast today. So, Dr. Lee, on behalf of the OI Foundation, thank you so much for all that you do for people living with OI, and look forward to many exciting discoveries and adventures to come.
We look forward to working together with you.